Hello and welcome to the Excel Level 2 training here at the Seattle Lighthouse.
We're going to review a little bit of Excel Level 1, a little bit about formatting and some of the, what we went into filters. We looked at how to do a freeze pane. So we'll look at a couple of those things, and then we'll start getting more into the formulas, vertical lookup, and pivot tables. Vertical lookups and pivot tables are designed for those really large overflowing spreadsheets. We're going to show you an example of something that I think 4,000 lines on a spreadsheet, and I only want to see 2 or 3 things, and I don't want to have to go filter, filter, filter. And a pivot table allows you to very quickly do a little summary window. You can drag it around anywhere you want to see it, and it also allows pivot tables. You can also do pivot charts. So if you want to see a chart change as you select data differently, you can watch the chart change. And then vertical lookups are for those, again, I've got long lists of data over here, and I have long lists of data somewhere else, and I need to merge them. And I don't want to do a cut and paste. Heather gave me a really good example of having to look at another spreadsheet to look up something and then have to hand type it in, those sorts of things. So we'll take a look at all those and see how they're used. So again, formatting a cell, you can do from a right click, almost any formatting for any cell, the spreadsheet as a whole or large groups of cells. You can do with a right click and pull up that format menu and then go on down to format cell. And from there, we're going to try, in this case, we're going to have 2 columns of numbers, and we want them to be currency. So we want the $ in front, we want the 2 decimal places afterwards. So by going to number and selecting currency, it defaults to the $ and the 2 decimal places for your pennies afterwards. And of course, you have a couple samples or examples that you can go from to say, hey, I want to see when it's negative, I want it to be red or in brackets, and that sort of thing. So we selected a cell, we went and said currency, and there it is. It put decimal 00, put the $ in front of it. If we selected the whole column or the whole sheet, we could format it, all in math, all at one time. What comes in handy is if you already know how you're going to lay out your spreadsheet, is before you even start putting data in, go ahead and do all your formatting up ahead. And you can select the entire cell by going up to this little square here. You can float up to that little square, and it will just automatically select the whole sheet, so you don't have to do that click and drag and go down to 4,000 rows, that sort of thing. Yeah, by clicking that little arrow up in the corner between A and 1, it selects the whole sheet by default for you. So it comes in handy. So again, a little bit about filters and freeze panes and how to use those as tools. So filters, again, I've got large columns of data. I don't have enough data to where I really want to use either a vertical lookup or a pivot table, which is when I get much larger pieces of data, you want to revert over to a pivot table. But if I just wanted to put some filters in there so I can filter out smaller things, you select that upper row and click filter, and it will drop a couple little buttons on there for you. And again, you can select any of those buttons, and it defaults to all. And by selecting that select all, it will unselect everything, and then you go and pick what you do want to see. So in this instance, we're looking at, I select just January, and all I see is January's data presented in the filters. So again, if I had some sums or some totals somewhere, or if I had a chart based on that selection of data, my chart would change, or my total would change. So I would only see the totals for January. I wouldn't see totals for the entire range anymore. So filters not only do just what you're seeing at the moment, if that data is tied anywhere else, it blocks it from that as well. So it's ways to be able to tie other spreadsheets in and things. And by filtering that data out, it kind of makes it invisible temporarily. And again, we'll do all of this live in the Excel sheet that I'll hand out to you guys afterwards, the electronic version. So, and again, freeze panes. If we start getting into those long columns of data, you know, what happens as soon as you start scrolling down is your top row disappears. And same thing over here. I don't want my months to disappear as I start scrolling off to the right. All of a sudden I start getting down into that lower right-hand corner of data, and all my titles disappear. So you can do freeze panes both horizontal and vertical. And very simple to do. By selecting that top row, you can just click one. Click one, that'll select that whole top row. And then you can go to your view and freeze pane. So in the view tab, you go to freeze pane, and there's your rows, and then there's your column that you can select. So you can say rows or column. In this case, we're going to select that top row. And then now as we scroll down through our data, that top row stays. And you can see how all the little cell lines disappear. So now we can scroll down 4,000 rows if we wanted. That top row won't disappear out of our view anymore. And again, you can do the same thing with that month column if you wanted to. So that just stays there. The rest of the spreadsheet just slides around underneath it. So again, and some of the projects you're going to work on might have some of those large, and hopefully will have, you know, large pieces of data that you need to sort and filter through. So that'll come in real handy. And then real quick on format per condition. A lot of different formatting you can do all around numbers, and do I want it to display as decimal, as text? Sometimes you don't want Excel to view it as a number. I want it just to view it as text. So you can tell it to view it only as text. And in this case, you can do format per condition as far as what color do I want the cell to be, what font do I want it to be. So it can be a normal sized font, but as soon as a certain condition arises, the font gets really big or the cell changes color. So again, just by selecting that range of cells, and right there from the home menu, you can go to additional formatting. This little window pops up, and there's a lot of pre-built, pre-designed conditions that you can put in there. In this case, I just went very easily and just said, hey, when the cell says yes, turn green and go here. If the cell says no, go red, and then go to the same place. So in this instance, the formula says if J1, which is the total sum, is greater than 4,000, say yes, comma, which means otherwise no. So the formula is telling it if it's above 4,000, put yes there. And that's where it comes from. It's right in here. Like in those brackets, I can have it say, you know, whatever we want. And you can have multiples of these. You can have dozens of them. If it's between this and this number, you can say, you know, whatever you want text-wise you want in there, whatever color, whatever condition you want. So in this case, we're at 4145, so of course it turns green, it says yes. And now in this column, the conditional formatting that we have represented there is it looks over the range of numbers, and the darker green it is, the higher it is within the range. The closer to red it is the lower in the range. So again, visually, you can look at that real quick and say, well, here's my low number, here's some mid-range numbers, and here's some of my higher numbers. It'll very quickly sort those out visually. So now we'll get into some of the new stuff for Excel 2, which is just some real simple math functions. The thing that Excel's actually built for is doing math. Over the years, Excel started out doing just very simple math functions. And over the years, it's gotten more and more sophisticated mathematics. You used to have to go and buy different modules to be able to do Six Sigma. You had to go out and buy an Excel module that was around $600–700. Diana's been doing this long enough. She still has that module on her laptop. So it used to be that way, and now Excel's finally starting to put those math functions into Excel. There's still a few out there that you have to go and buy some interesting little statistical packages that you can put on there. But for the most part, any mathematics that 99% of the world's going to do is built into Excel these days. So real simple formulas to do in Excel is if you're going to do a sum or an addition, pretty basic. You're using the plus symbol that's built into the keyboard. To do a subtraction or a minus, you're using that little dash symbol built into the keyboard. Multiplication, since it doesn't do the X for multiplication like how we were taught doing as kids, it uses the asterisk symbol for times for multiplication. And then divide by backslash, and that's fairly common mathematics. So not that dot line dot, which again that's not built into the keyboard. It's using the backslash symbol. So any formula that you do in Excel up on the formula bar, and we'll show you, every formula, no matter how simple or complicated, starts with the equal sign. It always starts with the equal sign. As soon as Excel sees that the first character is equal, it jumps into formula mode for you. You type anything else in there and it just sees it as text. Just as you're just doing some random text. So if I want to do a real basic formula in Excel, I want to add 3 plus 4, or in this case, whatever is in one cell, I want to add it with whatever's in another cell, and I want the result. So if I want to do this formula in Excel, I'm going to select the cell, and then I jump up to the formula bar. So that's where you see that little FX symbol. That's the formula bar. So that's where you can start typing in your formula. So in this case, I want to do equals B5, which is the number 3, and D5, which happens to be 4, the cell that has the number 4 in it. I wanted to add those two. Now I can type in B5 plus D5, or I can just type equals and click on the cell B5, and it'll put B5 in there for me. So I don't have to type in, especially if you're like way down there and you're at D173 and that sort of thing. Just click on, you can just start clicking on cells, and it'll drop the cell in there for you. So I can type that in, or I can do partly typing, partly clicking on cells. The second I hit enter, boom, the number 7 drops in there. So typing in formulas are very quick and easy. And same thing with the minus. I want to do 4 minus 3. I would type in basically the same formula. In this case, I have B8 and D8, and I'm going to get the result of 1. Multiplication, again, I'm typing in that same formula line, and this time I'm getting the result of 12. And then the divide, again, all the same. So, any questions on basic formulas? We're going to get into them on the live Excel, but I'm going to throw up on the screen here in a minute, but so you can actually see what it looks like as you type them in. And then charts. That's one thing most companies are really happy to do. They think if you built a chart, that means you're doing something. Of course, the chart should actually tell a story or represent some data, but charts, again, in Excel are actually pretty simple. They used to be a little more sophisticated, but now there's a chart menu, so you can very easily go in and select data and throw a chart together. Some of your data, as long as it's in the right format, will build a pretty decent chart easily for you. So again, the caution of making sure you've got your data separated out and you've got data in rows labeled and columns labeled, kind of like what we were showing as an example. We had our months going down a column, and we had A, B, and C going across the top in rows. It makes it really easy for Excel to grab that information and turn it into a decent chart. So down below, as you can see, you've got January, February, and it goes all the way to September. Off to the side, it represents A, B, and C in the different colors for it. So quick, easy chart. So here we are with all that data. I want to make a chart, but I only want to make a chart for the months going through September, and I just want A, B, and C. I don't want the total in there. So I just want to see a representation of January through September and just through A, B, and C. So I just select those, starting with the upper left, going down to your lower right, and then go up to Insert, and in this case, I'm going to go to the Chart menu. Insert the chart, and this one's going to be in columns. That's the first default. That's what most charts end up being, is column chart, like a Pareto. And of course, you can get fancy and go to cylinders or cones or pyramids, and you can do all kinds of cutesy things. But to make something at least representing of data as best as possible, is just stick with the 2D column chart. So the very first one, 90% of the time, that's what you're going to use. So again, just select the data, go to column in that very first chart, and the chart appears. Just that quick and easy. Now this now is treated as an image, so you can drag it around, move it to a different page somewhere. It can even be on a different spreadsheet somewhere. You can pick that up, copy it, and go move it to another document somewhere. And when this file gets updated, that chart will get updated when that document's open, even Word or PowerPoint. If I had that in like in this PowerPoint, not as an image, but as an Excel file, the minute I opened it up, it would look on the network for that document and try to see if there was any changes made. So it's a living document regardless of where it resides. So any of that data changes, those bars will move around and change. And we'll look at that in the live Excel. So pretty quick and easy. And then we're going to take a look at vertical lookups with our live Excel. Now what a vertical lookup does is it's mainly for looking at large columns of data. And I mean columns being up and down, vertical data. It's designed to look at those large columns of data and go to another location and try to find that matching piece of information, and then go across a row and find some other information and marry it up. So Heather had a good example of a spreadsheet that had a bunch of information, and you had to go to another spreadsheet to find data, and then you had to type it in alongside of it. So here's an example of, I've got a bunch of items that sell in my gift shop. I have prices and I have categories, but the category code was not on my spreadsheet. Those were on another list somewhere. So I didn't want to sit there and have to look up what the category code for kitchen was, that it's 105. I had to go look at another piece of information and type it in. Well, I could do a vertical lookup. So what my vertical lookup does is it looks at a long list, looks for spice rack. It goes over however many rows or columns I tell it to, finds that piece of information and drops it in there for me. So if you look up here, the formula says vertical lookup, and there's a bunch of information there. We'll walk through it little by little as we get into this. But basically what the vertical lookup does, in this case, it's right up here, I wanted to know what my current price of my cutting boards were. So the vertical lookup was telling me to go to vertical lookup, look up cutting board, and look for cutting board in this range of cells, and then scoot over to. So it went down the rack, it found cutting board at 17. It scooted over to the second row, found $24.99, and put it up there for me. And if it doesn't see it, it would put false up in there for me. And again, that false can be trigger anything I want. Now, if I put true in there, true means find something that's close to cutting board. So if I had just cutting and didn't have cutting board, it would say, yeah, close enough, and put it in there. So sometimes you have large columns of data where cutting board might have been misspelled, or somebody just wrote board cutting instead, put it in reverse. So by putting true in there, it would tell it, yeah, just find it in whatever form you can find it, or close enough to it, and put it in there. False means no, it needs to be exactly as what I'm telling it to go look, for. So that was what the formula would look like. Vertical lookup, cutting board, range. So all of this looks like, oh, I have to memorize. Do I have to memorize all this? You really don't. The minute you type in VLOOK equals VLOOKUP, a little window pops open and walks you through all the different steps. So in Excel, the first window will pop open and say, where do you want the data to land? And you say, well, I want it to land here. Okay, well, what range do you want it to look for? Well, you select the range. And it says, how many rows over is it? So it walks you through that whole formula step by step and allows you to build it. After a while, you just start typing it in, knocking it out yourself and ignoring that help. But it works, it really walks you through all of that. So in this image here, I've got two vertical lookups. I've got one very simple one, just looking for cutting board, looking for the price. The one that's in this column, it's actually looking at a column of data somewhere else on the spreadsheet. And it's looking at every single one of these items at another list, and then it's looking for that code and dropping it in there for me. So now I didn't have to go and look at that other list and add that code in there over and over and over again. It did it all for me. And then if you want to remove the vertical lookup from that point, you can copy that, remove the formula, and paste it back into place, and you don't need a vertical lookup anymore. So this comes in handy when you've got 4 or 5 spreadsheets of information from different places and you want to merge it all. And we've done that with purchasing and accounting. Sometimes you get these 2 different reports and you'd like to merge that information together. So you can do it with a vertical lookup and then remove the lookup, and now you've got your information merged. So again, we'll get into this a little bit more on the live one, and then I'll send this to you guys, of course, afterwards, so you can go in there and play around with it. And then you'll have the formulas. You can copy and paste formulas just like you can copy and paste text or numbers in Excel. So you can steal it from this and use it someplace else. And I encourage you to go in there and play around with that range, type in some different things. This one, if you see here, you don't see any dollar signs in between the alpha and the numeric characters. You don't see dollar signs, but up on the formula bar, you see dollar signs in there. What that is since this cell is the one that's selected, that's what you're seeing. When you copy and paste this down through the column, I did one formula, and now I want to copy that formula all the way through. Excel will automatically keep expanding as you go down. Well, I don't want it to do that. I want it to just stay within that zone. So you put the little dollar sign between the alpha and the numeric characters, and that makes it stay within its little range of an area. So if I put that formula here and scanned it down, the rows down below or the spreadsheet over here that it's looking at, it would just keep expanding the range there, and it's just going to get into a bunch of things where there's no data. So a way to do copy and paste on formulas, but not travel, just stay within the fenced yard basically. You put those little dollar signs in between numbers. And then pivot tables. Believe it or not, pivot tables are much more sophisticated than a vertical lookup. The nice thing is they're even easier to put in. So the nice thing with pivot tables, again on the insert menu where we do charts, there's pivot table, very first thing, very first selection. So instead of analyzing tons of records, a pivot table can kind of aggregate or condense all that information with just a few clicks. So you might think of a pivot table as more of a summary of what's on this huge spreadsheet. You can water it down and really get to the root of some of the information very easily. So in this little demo that I've got, I actually snagged a spreadsheet that's got 4,000 lines on it of information. And it's got voter registration area. It's got their party affiliation, what precinct, their age, and when they last voted, and whether their ballot status is either poll or permanent. I'm not sure what the difference is. but I've got this spreadsheet of data, 4,000 people on it. And there's just some information I want to know. I've got filters up here, so I could try to filter the data, but I'd really like to know what are my age groups and what are their party affiliations. So very quickly, I want to be able to find that information out. So the easiest way to do that is with the pivot table. So I can select the area. Again, I can just hit that little upper arrow and just select the whole area if I want. Or in this case, I drag all the way down to get down to row number 4,000. And then I go up and hit pivot table, and it gives me an opportunity to say, do I want a table or a chart? So in this instance, I'm going to want a pivot table. I want to see a little window of information. I don't want to see a chart just yet. So range comes up. Now, a neat little shortcut that you can do is you can see my selection here, pivot table only goes to G38. So I actually have G4000 is how far it goes. So instead of doing that drag and select for 4,000 rows, which takes a couple minutes, just select down to a certain point, hit pivot table, and then go in and type 4,000 into that row. So I backspaced out 38, went to 4,000, and it expanded it all the way for me. So it's a little shortcut to keep you from having to do that drag all the way down to 4,000. So there's my range. I want it to go through that area, and it defaults to a new worksheet. It wants to open a new worksheet for you. In this case, I want to keep it on my existing worksheet, and if you select that, it wants to know where do you want that little window to appear. So I told it where I want the window to appear, and again, you just click a cell and just say, yeah, I want it to land right here. And then that's what pops up. So I've got my row label, I've got the sum of my precinct showed up as a default. So here's my age group and the sum of people in that age group under each one of the different affiliations. So here's all my check boxes over here. I can check or uncheck those. I can drag them down to the row label. I can drag them down to the sum. See the little sideways M, that means sum. So if I wanted to sum a certain piece of information, I just drag them between those two windows, and then my report changes. I can change the little check marks up here of what I want to be represented, and all that data changes. The minute I click outside of this window, that window on the right goes away, and all I see is my pivot table. So again, there's my age groups and my party. Over here are my rows, and then my total is over here in the sum. If I didn't want to see that, if I wanted to see my party sum, I would just drag party over there and it would sum it up by party. So here I have selected just the party and age groups, and I have the count of the age groups under my values, so there I am. So there's all my parties, and there's my sum within each party. I'm going to 3,999. So I can see the Martian party isn't too awful popular, and the Green party is even less popular. But I can very easily look at it and say, hey, Democrats for those areas are my majority. So if someone asks, who are the, out of those precincts, which party has the most people voting in it? It'd take you a while to sit there and sort and filter and try to figure that out, maybe make a chart and try to figure it all out, where with the pivot table, now I've got it. Now if I go up and select that insert pivot chart on top of this, now I would have a chart representing that information very easily. So questions on any of that? We'll get into the live version of this here in just a second. But any questions on any of that stuff? And again, filters. So we talked about how to add filters. If I want to filter these couple columns up here, and I can look at data and filter, that nice little funnel icon. And there's my filters. And again, I only want to see January. So by hitting select all, selecting January, and that's all I see is January. So that one really comes in handy. So again, here I am with large columns of data. And I go to scroll down below, and it's like, oh, there goes all my titles across the top. So I want that to stay where it's at. Freeze panes, freeze the top row. And then unfreeze. There we go. View. There we go. Thank you. And yeah, have to replace that mouse. It's acting up on me a little bit. So now you can see that top row stays. I can scroll through lots and lots of data. And again, I can do the same thing on the column. So my filters are still there, but now my row's frozen. So back to sums. Let's open these up so we can actually see the numbers. So again, I wanted to see, we showed what addition looks like, plus, minus, multiplication, divide. So I picked this top cell, and I can go up here, and again, as soon as I hit equals, you can see sum came up as a default over here on the upper left. Sum shows up over there. So that's pretty much, it just assumes that's the most common one that you're going to do. You can do whatever formula you want in there. But let's just say we're going to add that cell. So it's starting to build the formula for us. And we're going to do plus this cell plus that cell. So there's my formula across the top. Excel does a nice job of kind of color coding the cells as you go, so you can kind of see where your formula is being built from. And then boom. Now if you saw the number up here, appeared all of a sudden, because I do have a formula here that's looking to sum that entire total column for me. So as numbers appear here, this number shows up and just keeps getting larger. So that's one of those things with formulas, wherever you add formulas and you've got formulas elsewhere that are affected by those cells, you kind of have to be aware of that. But the nice thing is, as soon as I clicked on that cell and I click on the formula bar, it highlights what it's looking at. So if I look at a formula and go, where the heck is that reading from? I can just click on it and it's going to show me. Or it would take you to another page somewhere and show you where it's coming from. So if that formula was reading another tab down here, it would open that tab and show me. So pretty handy. So I have this one showing me the sum of A, B, and C and giving me a total. Now I want that all the way through the column. I don't want to have to type in that over and over and over again. So you see that little square down in the lower right hand corner, and as soon as I hover on it, I get that little tiny plus sign. So now I can click and drag that formula, copy it all the way down to the bottom, and now it just made the assumption of you want the same row summed up like the one above, and it just copied all those sums in there for me. Yes. Yeah. The auto sum? Yeah.
Can we do that?
Yes. So what Paul is asking is about auto sum. When you, again, Excel, when you go to the far right, or when you go across the bottom of rows of information like this, in this case numbers, you can just click on the auto sum button. In most Excels, it's up on that formula bar. You'll see that sideways M, which is the Greek symbol. Yeah, you'll see that M that's sideways, and that means auto sum. So I can click that cell. Let's say that very top cell that I started in. I can click that cell, and I can just do auto sum, and it would just assume I want the information off to the left. Or if I was down at the bottom and said, it went down here and said auto sum, it would look up above. There we go. If I went there and hit auto sum, it would look up above and say, oh, you want all those numbers summed up. So it saves you even more time, especially if you've got large pieces of data, is to use auto sum. Save a lot of time. So again, here I've got, now that I've summed up that column, you can see how my total for that column changed. If any of these numbers changed, let's say that changed to 115, the sum over there changed, the quantity up here updated. If we updated a few more, let's turn this one to 200. So now this turned green, and yes, because this sum is now above 4,000. So you got a lot of different things going on, just depending on the information you have in there, with all this auto summing going on. Now, what's represented here with the 9.4 and the 14, it's doing exactly the same mathematical formula, both of them, but you got two different answers. And the reason is, on the 9.4, I have it bracketed. So by doing brackets around your formula in pieces, I'm telling it to do that piece of math first, do that piece of math separate, and then do whatever functions in between. So in this instance, I'm saying do the C5 plus C6, and then get me the result of D7 divided by D8, multiply them, and then do a -2 at the very end. So I have it bracketed, telling it in what order to do the mathematics. Where in the other one, no brackets. So it's going to do each one of those math functions in order, in the exact order you put it. So it's one of those things, it's like, you got to be kind of careful how you say, well, I want that added to that, divide that, and then take away this. If you put it in different orders, or you don't put brackets around it, you'll get two different answers. So again, Excel, like other, yeah, the bracket. Yeah, so the what Paula was asking is brackets in not parentheses, but the full bracket. So Excel, like any other computer, unfortunately, does exactly what you tell it to do, not necessarily what you wanted it to do. Ooh, and then charts. So this chart that I have on the screen now is actually a representation of the data on the previous tab we were just looking at. So as we can see, January 15th, we've got A, B, and C represented down there. Fairly low bars down there for some reason. So we'll go over here and look at here in January. Here's A, B, and C. That's what's being represented on that chart. Let's change C to a much higher number. So it jumps up to 56. We go back to our chart, and we just saw that pop up. So by viewing it, it refreshed itself. So this chart can be, again, on the same page, different workbook altogether across the network somewhere. As long as it's on the same network or networks that talk to each other, security and different things can get in the way sometimes. But what you'll see if you opened this file up and it was reading data from, say, a chart or information that Heather has on her computer, it would pop up and say, this thing has links, would you like me to go try and refresh? So if you say yes, it's going to go and say, I can't, you don't have permissions to get to that. So one of the things you have to be careful when you're spreading across networks is make sure the connection stays there. So again, as you change data, you'll watch, here, let's change this to 23. The chart will change. So we'll jump over to chart and pew. And then the whole perspective changed, as you notice. As certain numbers go up or down, all your representation of your lines will change view for you. So you always end up with a decent looking chart. So how do we get a chart? So again, I want to build a chart that looks really similar to that one. I don't want total in there, because if you have total in there, I'm going to have one really tall bar right next to a bunch of small ones. And that doesn't necessarily give me the information I really need to see. So I want a chart. I want to go down to, let's see, I want to go down to, just say to August. I only want to see ABC through August. And I'm going to insert a chart. So here's my bar charts. I can do squiggle line, my little line charts, a lot of different charts I can do. But in this case, I just want to do a simple chart. And there it is. By selecting the data and selecting the chart type, it pops the chart in. Again, if I can move it anywhere, as you can see, it treats it like an image. You can move it around like an image, put it anywhere. I can resize it, move it off to the side, move it around, like again, resize anything I want. Change the title very easily. It's just a piece of text. Change the title to whatever I want. Quick and easy to do. Now, if I want to go in and say, I can go into design mode, I can change colors, add a chart element. So there's axes, error bars, a lot of different things. As long as you select the chart editing tool stays live. So you can go in there and play around with how it looks and formatting and all different kinds of fun things, fill-ins. So a lot of fun stuff you can do with it from there. And as soon as you unselect it, that chart menu goes away. So now I've got this cool little chart showing me that data. So, okay on charts? And again, formulas. We kind of went through that. That one's pretty quick and easy. I want to do the, where'd I go? Just equals this plus that. Pretty simple on the formulas. Or I can just literally just equals, and what is that, B14? And we're going to do a divide by D14. And I'm just typing it in freehand there. And look what it did. Ah, interesting. Formatted as text. That was one of the things, like when I mentioned earlier, is like one of the things you have to watch out for with Excel is you go and format your whole spreadsheet beforehand. Well, one of the things that Excel does, exactly what you tell it to do. In this case, we told it, no matter what I type in there, treat it as text. Don't try to do a formula, just let me type in what I want to type in. So it was treating it as text. The second I go in and say it's a number, and don't give me any decimal points, just leave it alone. Now we can go back in there and say, well, show me equals that divided by that. Now it treats it as a formula. Treats it as a number. So kind of interesting what Like again, you're like, man, what am I doing wrong? What am I doing wrong? Yeah, formatting sneak up and get you every once in a while. And that, again, you have to caution because you might type in a number somewhere. I typed in 10, and it's going to take 10. It's formatted as text. Elsewhere in my formula, it's not going to look at that as a number as part of the sum. So your sums are off, and you're wondering what the heck's going on. So again, caution about that text. And then vertical lookup. When you see that little number symbol from screen to screen, you just have to widen the row out or widen the column out a little bit so it appears normally. So going from my desktop to my laptop screen was a little bit different. So again, vertical lookup. There's my formula up there, just telling me that I want it to look for cutting board, and I want it to go down through A14 to B28, which is down here. I want it to go through all of this data. And let's widen this out a little bit so we can see it. So I'll show you what that would look like. We're going to delete that formula out of there. So we're going to hit the function button. And we're going to tell it we're going to go look for VLOOKUP. And okay. So we told it to give me a hand with VLOOKUP. So we're going to get rid of some of that junk, make it easier on ourselves. So lookup value. So what do we want it to go look up for us? Well, I want it to look up cutting board. So I can either type that in, or I can hit this little button here, and it'll direct me to tell me to go point at a cell. It's like, what word do you want me to look up, or what cell do you want me to look up? So in this case, we're just going to say, hey, look up cutting board. Close quote, bracket. And table array. Okay, what area do you want me to go look at? So we selected the little button, and I want it to look through this group, A14 to B28, so there's that. What column index, of which again, how far over do I want it to go? Well, I only want it to go the next column over, so that's column 2. And then my range lookup, that's my logical. If you see down below, it says true or false. So if I want an exact match, I want it to say false, which means if you don't find an exact match, I want you to fault. So we're going to do false. But here and say, let's say it's cutting B. It still finds it because it's close. We called it cutting B. It's like, yeah, close enough. It's got enough characters that's going to find it anyway. Spelled cutting board wrong, which happens a lot. That's my most common one, is getting 2 letters crossed up. Again, it's like, yeah, it found it. Close enough. But now that cutting board spelled wrong, and we say false, yeah, NA, I don't see it, because it's not an exact spell. So you can get creative with your vertical lookup to find things like that. So that was an instance where I just want what the cutting board price is at any one time. It's always show that to me. So I've got that in there. But now down below here, I've got a vertical lookup going to another area, which is actually down low here. So here's my list of categories and my category codes over here. And I want to plant the category code down this column, and I don't want to have to look up each one and type each one in. So I did the same exact vertical lookup formula as up above. I told it to look through this range, but since I want to copy it through, if I told it to look up this range down below, and I didn't put those those money symbols in between there, it would, as I copied it down, it would go to that range and continue the range down below the category and the code listing. It would just keep it would just keep moving that window down, further down. So by putting those dollar signs in there, as I copied and pasted below, you see nothing changes except for the cell location. As I scroll down, that's all you see change. Everything else stays the same. If I remove those dollar symbols, that range would just keep expanding by one as it went along. So now it put that category code in there for me. I don't have to, run around and try to manually input any of that anymore. And then back to our little pivot table. So here was all of our long lists of data. Like I said, it goes down to 4,000. And again, I'm looking at my row labels, which is my different parties, how many people, or a sum of the precincts, actually. And it's like, well, that's not quite right. I really don't want to see the sum of the precincts. So I can unselect precinct, and I can go to my age groups. And I want to see a sum of the parties. So I can drag that over to the sum area. And then by clicking outside of that window, it goes away. So there's the sum of my parties in my different age groups. So it's like, well, what party are they affiliated? So there's my party. I can move age group over. And again, changes. I can add to it. How about last voted? Let's select last voted. We can move this text window out of the way. So there's a long list of, there's my age groups and when they last voted based off the party that they voted for. So a really easy way to take that 4,000 lines of information and do a nice little summary. So how do you do a pivot table? We're just going to go ahead and doesn't want to change. Let's move this text, a little bit of text out of our way. So again, I'm only selecting a small piece of this, and we're going to go to insert a pivot table, and it's only down to G21, but I know it goes down to 3999, and I want it on the let's do a new worksheet. So it opened up a new worksheet for us. And I can look at party, age group, last voted, and I want to sum up my age groups. So that easy. If I wanted it in the same sheet, I could have selected keep it in the existing. But in this case, it opened up a new tab. And the minute I select it, that big window goes away. If I want to rearrange it, I just select it and it pops back up. So quick and easy. It's fun stuff to play around with. So if we wanted to to name it something else, we could. So since we told it to expand all the way, it went all the way down to 4,000. We didn't have to select the entire thing. But pivot tables are actually pretty easy to implement now. It used to be you had to write that formula out for each one of those things. So now it takes a lot of assumptions and builds in some really nice features to be able to quickly look at it. And again, you can just go back and say, hey, insert a chart. Do the same thing. You can say, well, I don't want to do a pivot table, I want to do a chart. And do the same thing with the charts. And then to show you a couple of fun things that we've done with Excel here in the building, that was kind of interesting. Everyone remembers the Biggest Loser contest we did, I think, last year and the year before, maybe? I was approached to help with it. I replaced all the names with celebrity names. Of course, I didn't want anybody's personal names and their weight and everything in there. It embarrassed a few. It more than embarrassed a few people, and I think I would have been drummed out of here pretty quick. So a bunch of celebrities in there. The way they were going to do the contest was by pounds. They were just going to say, well, team one, this was their total weight, and at the end of week 2, their total weight was this, so they win. And it's not a great way to do a weight contest. The Biggest Loser, actual loser contest is all done by percentage of weight. Because a person that weighs 110 pounds and they lose 2 or 3 pounds, pretty tremendous compared to someone that weighs 300 pounds and they lose a pound or 2 because they skipped lunch and they win. So, not a fair way to do it. So we built this spreadsheet that enabled us to say, hey, based on your starting weight and your weight loss at week 1, this was your percentage of loss. So we could track it by the individual, but we could also track it by the team. So down below, we could say, hey, the winners of that week was team 1 because they had a 1% weight loss, so the cell turned green. And then down below, we could say, well, if we were doing it the old way, if we were going to do it by pounds, the winner would actually be team 2. Team 2 lost 11 pounds, but it was only 9% of their total weight. Team 1 lost 10 pounds, but it was 1% of their total weight. So they lost a higher percentage, so they won. So it was much more fair way to run the contest, but it enabled us to track this, and only one person has the actual names and actual weights, and she's been sworn to secrecy. So whenever she sent it to me because she questioned a formula, she had to delete names and put random names in, so that's where we got this. We had a code of, if Heather was on that spreadsheet, her code name was probably Jennifer Lopez, but I didn't know that Jennifer Lopez represented Heather. Only one person did. So, and I won't tell you who that is because you'll probably want to go kill her now. So, to keep that secret. But that was the way we did this all the way through 12 weeks, I think. I think we did it for like 12 weeks. And week by week, we were able to track. We had week 1, week 2, all the way to week 12, and able to track how everybody was doing. And then this one was kind of interesting. I asked for a list of all of our employees so I could create the training database that I use for lean training. I wanted everyone's name, first name, last name. For whatever reason, and they did it in Excel, and they did last name, first name of the supervisor, last name, first name of the employee, but I wanted everybody's name to be in the right order. Well, since the full name was in a single cell, if it was in 2 cells, different cells, it'd be easy to swap it around. Well, they did it in Excel and put the full name in a single cell. So there is formulas for just about anything, just depending on how creative you want to get in Excel. So here's Mary's name. Kirk's name is the supervisor over here. Kind of a crazy long formula up there, but basically what I told it to do is go to A2, look for a space. So you see there's nothing between the quotes. It's like go to A2 and find the space. and then I'm telling it to go to the end of the, where basically where it runs out. So basically what I'm telling the formula to do is find the space, separate those two lengths of characters, and swap them around. Just do a swap for me. So it did that swap for me, so it turned Adams Kirk into Kirk Adams, and it changed Mary, her last name is Cabrian? I forget how it's pronounced, Cabrian. Yeah, it swapped hers around for me. And I have that running all through so you can see how the cells changed as I expanded. So in this case, I didn't put the dollar signs in there because I did want it to change as it goes down, so it would expand for me. So I did that for the whole company, so it swapped them all around very easily for me.
In that formula, what is mid and blend? What is that?
Oh, mid is looking for that middle. So that's where you're telling it to look for something in the middle of a bunch of text. So I put in within those brackets where it's blank, the two quotes. If I put A or 7 or something, that would just say somewhere in the middle of a stream of text, find this. So that's what I'm told it to do. Is on B14 and only B14, go in the middle of the text somewhere and find the space. So it found space. The space in electronics is a character. It's blank. We look at it as just a blank space, but it actually has a value. So it goes and finds that value. And then the len or length in the formula, and then +1, I'm saying, hey, the length is basically saying reverse it. And then +1 is telling it to put that space back in between there again. So kind of fun to play with, but they're usually not used in combination with each other. They're usually used for different things. So in this case, they were used in unison, and it enabled me to take a name. There was a couple names that had a hard time with. People who had names like Garlina has a hyphen in between hers, but some people have like their full name, so it had like first, middle, last. So it struggled with that space, and it kind of scrambled their names around a little bit. So, because again, it's doing exactly what I'm telling it to do. If I put in the formula to say, yeah, and if you find a second space, ignore it, it would have done that. But just some fun things you can do with Excel. And just depends on how creative you get with it. So, questions on any of it? We went past our time just a little bit, but I'll send you guys this spreadsheet electronic. Once this is done, I'll send you this version as well if you like, and of course you've got the printed version. So, but no questions on any of it, or want to review any of it? So, well, fantastic. Thank you, everybody.